All right, so good morning, everyone, and thank you to the Saturday, October 24th WEG Coffee and Conversation. This morning, it's really wonderful. We have Alice Rose, who's going to do a presentation, and today her topic is Chaim Soutine in Philadelphia. And at this time, I'll turn the conversation over to Alice. So please, it's screen yours, Alice.
Okay, so this is the talk on Chaim Soutine, and I'm going to start by telling you why I volunteered to do this about 2 months ago when Candace was asking for volunteers, and that is because, so somebody's not muted, right? So, so this is Chaim Soutine's pastry chef, which is in Philadelphia at the Barnes. And I think, as many of you know, I am in training to be a docent at the Barnes Foundation, which started in the beginning of February. And so then, you know, then everything has been online. So I've been interested in this particular painting and the stories. And so I bought the two books on the right, Soutine Portrait and Chaim Soutine, which I'll talk about later. And when Candace asked about looking for volunteers, I had just received Shocking Paris by Stanley Meisler, Soutine, Chagall, and the Outsiders of Montparnasse. So let me get started, and I do have 175 slides, but I also have breaks, and so I'm just going to move along here. So this is Chaim Soutine, born in 1893, died in 1943 in Paris. He was born in Lithuania, which was part of Russia, to a very, very poor family, very poor. His father was a mender of clothes. He was the 10th of 11 children. We know that by the age of 16, he was producing art. And the story, the anecdote, which has come in several of the catalogs, reports that he drew a portrait of the rabbi, and the rabbi's son beat him up. His mother then went to the magistrate and got money for him, and with that money, he was able to go to art school in Minsk. Now, what's really important for me about this is that how can somebody who is so poor have the money? And that's how it got there. So there's a few names I can't pronounce, so I'm just going to let you read these. He met this Michelle Kay when he was in Minsk, whose father was a rabbi. And together they went to Vilna for 3 years. And so to the Fine Arts Academy. So Soutine had at least 3 full years of art training. So somebody's still on, still talking that I can hear.
Alice, if you would just hang on for 1 second. I'm going to interrupt here. Let me go to the list of, let's see who's.
It says Joan L. That's what's showing up on my screen.
Joan, would you go on mute, please? And looks like everybody else is on mute. Great.
Okay. So Soutine and he met this third artist, and the 3 of them plotted their future as artists in Paris, because Paris was the place to be. This was in the early 1900s. So Soutine goes to Paris in 1913. He was 20 years old. Like I said, he's had over 3 years of art school training, and they went to the Beehive, and Soutine enrolled in the École des Beaux-Arts. So here's a couple of facts. There are no early works. I keep putting this little portrait up in gold because this is his earliest self-portrait when he was 25 years old. There's no legitimate biography. There are lots of stories that have been written, but none. And that I am taking from the Shocking Paris book. There are also no reports of him talking about his art. And so he was speaking Yiddish. And so even to people who were his friends, he just didn't talk about his art. There's no dates on his work. There are no drawings, and I put 1999 there because of a catalog that was done. reinforces, at least at that time, that there are no drawings. He did not allow others to watch him paint, and he destroyed and cut works that he didn't like. And when he was in the south of France, he was so adamant about people not seeing his work or taking works that he didn't like that he actually burnt them because he didn't want people to touch his stuff. So there is a catalog raisonné that was done in 1993 with 497 works. Now, when I give you a blank screen, that means that I'm moving to a new thought, okay? So here's the Beehive. It was established in the early 1900s. There were about 100 studios, cheap rent, no heating or indoor plumbing, but it attracted immigrants and poor artists. Chagall also went there. He had a stipend coming into Paris, but he decided to go there because the rent was so cheap. And there were free models. So the big thing about the Beehive is that is where Soutine met Modigliani. So here is Amedeo Modigliani, who went to Paris in '06 when he was 22. The big thing that for me is important about Modigliani is that he was fluent in French and Italian. He's always listed as an Italian, coming into Paris, but his mom was from Marseille, and she taught languages. So his mother taught French, English, and Italian. So he was a multilingual guy. I mean, sort of a handsome fellow here, and there's lots of stories about him. But the big thing is that he was fluent in French. And so here is an early portrait, 1917, of Soutine by Modigliani, just compared to the self-portrait. And here is part of a chart that was given to us by Michael Taylor in 2011. And this is just a diagram of the Beehive, with some of, also called LaRouche, with some of the names of the artists and where they lived over the period of time. So I'm pointing here two of the artists who Soutine came to Paris with. And then you see number 9 is Leger, number 10 is Archipenko. Anyway, so this comes to us from Michael Taylor. So here's what Modigliani did. He became friends with Soutine at LaRouche. He took him to the cafes. Soutine apparently was very, very, very shy. He took Soutine to the Louvre, but the big, big thing that he did that was long lasting was that he introduced Soutine to his dealer, a man named Leopold Zabrowski. So Zabrowski was a dealer, but he had a client, a man named Jonas Netter, who lived in Alsace. He was a businessman who gave Zabrowski money to give an allowance to artists in exchange for paintings. Zabrowski's wife did not care for Soutine because over the years it's been pretty clear that Soutine was not a very kept man, did not keep himself up well. So Zabrowski sent Soutine to the south of France to a place called Chagall, near the Spanish border, but he also went to other places, but for the sake of expediency, I'm not telling you all of those places. So there is a portrait of Zabrowski in the second floor of the Barnes Foundation. I call it the Matisse room because the big piano, the music room is right across the hall. So this is Leopold Zabrowski. So when Soutine was in the south of France, he was living in hotels, and he did this painting of this pastry chef, which I'll show you a little bit more about him later. He did this painting, and this painting Zabrowski gave to Paul Guillaume. And new thought here, oh, right, he gave it to Paul Guillaume. Okay, so here we are. Now I'm changing the subject a little bit to talk about Albert Barnes. So Albert Barnes had a lot of money, and on November the 21st, Tom Lowe is going to be doing a talk about the Barnes Foundation and about Barnes. So I'm not going to do a lot of details here, but suffice it to say that in 1912, Albert Barnes gave his high school friend, William Glackens, $20,000 to go to Paris and to buy modern art. Glackens came back with 33 paintings. The most significant one for me is one of the Van Gogh's Postman, which is actually the only one that is signed. It's in room 2. And that began a long period of, actually until the end of his life, a period of Barnes systematically really learning about art. He after this purchase, he went to Paris himself and he met Leo Stein and started a relationship that with him via letters and visits and that lasted until Stein died. That's when he went to Leo and Gertrude Stein's apartment and saw, you know, the Matisses and the Picasso and all of the art that was in that apartment. So, and then he starts to buy. But the big thing that he's doing is that he is trying to define for himself what is good art, which is part of that conversation with Leo Stein. And then he also gets to know and works with John Dewey, with a professor at UPenn who helps him, you know, study. And he's going up to Columbia once a week for 3 years to take courses on aesthetics. And he's developing what his philosophy is, which, like I said, you'll hear from Tom in a few weeks. So in 1915, John Johnson, our John Johnson here from the museum, had been Barnes's attorney, and he revised his will. And we know then that Barnes had 200 paintings by then. So he's continuing to buy. And in 1922, this is 10 years after the Glackens purchase, he commissions Paul Kray to design a home for himself and a building for art. That he signs the papers, finishes up on the designs towards the end of 1922. So he then, and he has been very, very involved in the layout of the foundation with the room 1 and the small rooms on the side. So he knows exactly how much space he has. So he goes to Paris to start buying art. And they call it a shopping spree because it was. So he goes to the dealer, Paul Guillaume, who he regularly frequented, and he sees the pastry chef. He buys it immediately, and he then asks to meet the artist and see the other works. And he buys either 52 or 54 paintings from Sobrowski, who remember is Soutine's dealer. And the next day he sells some back to Guillaume, and then a little bit later he sells some back to a second dealer. But that was his purchase it was in 1922. And this is what he says: the main reason I bought so many of the paintings because they were a surprise, if not a shock, and I wanted to find out how he got that way. I felt he was making creative use of certain traits of Bosch, Tintoretto, Van Gogh, Daumier, Cezanne, and was getting new effects with color. The Soutine wasn't known. He was just one of the artists that Sobrowski was representing. So Guillaume had an exhibition in Paris that was called Recent Acquisitions, and in spring of 23, because Barnes had gone there in December, and so that's why there's always a question of whether it's 21 or 22. But you know, it was by 23 the paintings had come to Philadelphia, and he had an exhibition of his new paintings at PAFA, but it wasn't done under his name. It was a PAFA exhibition, and in that exhibition he had 19 Soutines, works by Lipschitz, Modigliani, Pastine, Kissling, Utrella, de Chirico, and Picasso, Matisse, and Derain. It was very poorly received. There was a lot of negative press, and specifically someone said the Soutine portraits were portraits of the dredges of humanity. So that was not good. So Barnes then, in 1925, his building is completed, and he has paintings that he's been buying. At that same shopping trip in 25, he did a lot of other major purchases, including 2 big purchases of the African art that's up in a lot of the corner rooms. So in the Barnes, the paintings are spread throughout the building. So I'm starting now in room 5. This is the room with the Franz Halls. And here are 2 of these first purchase paintings: the flayed rabbit and the woman with round eyes. And as you get to look at these paintings, you can see almost a commonality. This flayed rabbit is the only one of Soutine's flesh paintings that is at the Barnes. In room 10, there's a small painting called the White Hat. I just show you the two pictures. One is that I took from the website and the other's with my camera right in the gallery, which is just a little bit brighter. But it is on this wall in room 10 that has this magnificent Modigliani with the red hair and the black dress right in the middle. And here is this little person with a white hat. It doesn't say whether it's a boy or girl. It looks to me like a little boy. So right across the room from the Modigliani is a woman in blue. And in both of these rooms, there are small paintings by Matisse, by Picasso. This wall has a lot of Matisses on it. And here's the woman in blue. And I'll just let you take a look at this for a minute, because as I do photographs, I'll be showing you some of the photographs of the hands, because it is just fascinating to look at all of the colors that he has put into the flesh. And here's a photograph, a little bit too light, of her face, but you can see that what people appreciate about Soutine is the color and the brushwork. So in the next room, room 11, there are two Soutine landscapes on either side of the Modigliani. And then upstairs on the second floor, there's a figure with a landscape. It's in room 14, but it is above the door. So when I was getting ready to locate where these all were, because I didn't recognize this, I had to go find it. So here it is. And in room 14, also on the wall on the right, is also the woman seated in an armchair, once again with very elongated hands. So moving through to room 16, on a side wall is the pastry chef. And this is an awkward place for a painting because it's right in the doorway. And on the floor, you can see the little brown lines. And if you've been to the Barnes recently, you know they're still being really vigilant about you staying within the lines. And so this is a room that has capacity of 2 right now during COVID. But anyway, here is the pastry chef. And in that same room is a still life with flowers. This is just at the corner in room 16. And then going to room 19, here's a praying man, very rectangular portrait, tall. And on the other side, a man in blue. And they are in what I'm calling the Matisse room, room 19. And you can see these. So in that same room 19 is the red church, the girl in red, and a bouquet of flowers, which is one of the paintings that people look at and say, he was influenced by Van Gogh. So this is where they are. So they're the wall opposite of the two men. The red house is up here above the door. There's the little girl in red, the portrait, and it's in the same room with Zabrowski. So I mention these two because this room and room 14 are large rooms upstairs on the second floor, which have a capacity, I think, 6 or 7 or 8. So you can be in there for a while and you can look at the art if you want. So just moving around, there's another landscape from the south of France. So there are 21 Soutines in the Barnes collection. These are all from the original purchase. There's also 4 that I could not locate, and I just haven't had time to get to the archivist to find out exactly where they are, but I think that they are in storage. So they're landscapes, all landscapes. Winding road. And then this painting, which is actually not a great photograph because it's taken from a brochure. So the building was hung in 25, and Barnes continued to arrange paintings, but he did not buy any more Soutines. So there was very limited access to the galleries. As many of you know, it was for students, mostly for students and for people that Barnes was very friendly with. So now a new thought, and here, so this is why it's I'm having a second screen would have helped. So he was 29 when Barnes did these paintings. And by all accounts, Soutine had been extremely, extremely poor. There were all kinds of stories that we were talking about during the Chagall exhibition in 2011. But the big thing is that he was poor. He just, you know, except for this allowance that he got from Zabrowski, he just had no income. And the stories are that he was taking that allowance and he was spending it on paint. So after 23, this would have been that January time, Barnes did not buy any more Soutines, but the sales in Europe continued because Soutine was painting. Guillaume plus one other dealer had a stock, so he did not need money anymore. So he learned French, he bought a few clothes, he had steady income, and he had his first one-man show in Paris in 27, and then was in the 1930 exhibition at MoMA. He had two about 3-year relationships, and the top one is from a woman who he called Gard, Mademoiselle Gard. And she was, so Soutine also had a lot of stomach issues, which many people think was simply because he had just been so malnourished for the first 30 years of his life, but you know, they don't exactly know. She wrote a book called My Years with Soutine, and some of that is related in the Shocking Paris book. And one of the things about Gard is that she was a really good housekeeper. And so she helped organize Soutine's life. She helped him have better food. Then they went to a small town in Paris in the late 30s when they were registering all Jews in Vichy, France. And when they had a call for surrendering on demand, she went, but Soutine did not. He didn't, and I will talk about that a little bit later. So Gard goes off to a camp and eventually gets released, but will only go back to Soutine if he specifically asked for her. But by this time he is with another woman, Marie Berthe, who had actually been an early wife of Max Ernst. She had been a Chanel model. Soutine was taken with her. She was the woman who was with Soutine until he died. So he was in Paris during the during the late 30s, and then in various locations, but not too far from Paris. So he was in hiding in a small town outside of Chinon, and he was protected by the mayor. So that was just really clear that when they came rounding up Jews, or when they said to them, surrender, he just didn't do it, and the mayor didn't put his name on a list. So he was protected. And so towards the end of his life, he continued to do a lot of painting in the countryside. He was not on the emergency rescue committee list, which I will talk about later. And he died in 1943 after surgery in Paris. So there we are. So a new thought. So there are 5 Soutines in the Philadelphia Museum of Art collection. This one painting of Kissling, and it is the only one that's on view. I took a photograph of it when I was there a few weeks ago. It's large. It is the largest of the Soutines that are in Philadelphia. And here's a close-up of the hands. Look at the oranges and the greens and all of the colors of the paintings that he has taken and he has put into the hands. It's right next to a Modigliani, because that's how those curators would have put it together. And the little frame that's way over on the left, there isn't a picture of in this, is a Chagall. And to the right is a landscape by William Henry Johnson, who was an African-American artist who met Soutine in the south of France and really was inspired by him. So here are other paintings that we own, but they're not on view. I couldn't get the photographs off of the PMA website, so I just took screenshots here. So we have a woman in red, a girl in green, which I will talk about later, this landscape that is pretty large, and a second landscape. And then in 2018, we were given a portrait of Soutine done by a man named Leonard Baskin, and this is 20 years after he died. So I don't know what his source was. It could have been any one of the photographs because there were a lot of photographs at Soutine. So in the hallway right outside of room 267 is the Diego Rivera. So Diego Rivera was in the Montparnasse area around La Ruche. He was friends with Modigliani. He was part of the cafe crowd. So here's his Paris painting. And then right across the hall, of course, is our great 3:30, The Poet, which was conserved in 2011 for the exhibition. I'm just doing 2 photographs because I love Chagall's work. So the reason I'm going fast, you just have to really go over and take a look. And so here's the red and the designs that were part of his tribute, his looking back at Russia. So a new thought. So the largest collection of Soutines are at the Orangerie, and the second largest in the Barnes in Philadelphia. And this is one of the famous paintings that is at the Orangerie in the Paul Guillaume collection. And I just want to show you this. Most people go to the Orangerie to, first of all, to see the 8 glorious water lilies that were in the 2 oval rooms that were done by Monet and his gift to France after the First World War. But these are my highlights, but these are some of the paintings that are in Paul Guillaume's collection, which are part of the Orangerie. So now going into a new thought and talking about Barnes's shopping trips. So when Barnes started to buy, people started to take notice because he was just one of the Americans who was coming. He was buying what he really liked. He was, all the stories about him coming to Paris to shop are the intensity of going to all the dealers, looking at what's available, building his collection. And Paul Guillaume led Barnes to the Montparnasse studios. And when Barnes was there, he bought, in addition to buying all of the Soutines, he also bought 21 Pasquin watercolors and then bought more paintings by Modigliani and Kissling. In that 22 purchase, he bought 8 Lipschitz sculptures. He commissioned bas-reliefs for the Marion Building, for which he paid $6,000, which was enough for Lipschitz to buy a house. So just think about that a little bit. And here's a close-up of one of those sculptures. And I got all of this information from another great Michael Taylor book about Lipschitz in Philadelphia. So that's where all of that detail comes from. So Meisler talks about the Barnes purchase by Soutine as really starting the renewal, or probably, I don't know, the re-emergence of anti-Semitism and nationalism in Paris. People were jealous. Pasquin writes about all of the people coming to him to beg him to bring Albert Barnes to him. So there was a lot of jealousy. And so in 24, the Independent Salon started grouping artists by nationalities because all painters could come in who wanted to exhibit. Pasquin exhibited as an American because he had been here for 6 years, even though he was from Bulgaria. He was part of that Montparnasse group. And so they took the foreign-born artists and they let them be associated with Paris, but they couldn't call them French artists. So the title came up, and there's lots of writing about this, about the School of Paris. They were also called the Jewish School. They were called the Circle of Montparnasse. And in general, the School of Paris is considered Chagall, Soutine, and Modigliani, but there are many, many more. So in this search, in this reading, I found this website, École de Paris, from 1905-39, and it seems to be put together by a group maybe of dealers who are authenticating works. This is their website. And when you open it up, they have a list of 150 artists who they are considering part of the School of Paris. That website is in English, it's in French, and in Russian. So they also have, so when you click on each one of these names on their website, you will see, obviously you put it in English, and you will be able to see information about every one of these artists. There is also, there are films, but the films I believe are in Russian, because I sent this to Dee Grubin, who's my resource here, who said it was not Yiddish. So I think this is Russian. They're old films, but they're pretty interesting that you can watch, and if you can understand Russian, then of course you can see them. So now we're going to a new thought about recent exhibitions and catalogs. 1985. The Jewish Museum in New York started a series of exhibitions. The first one was Jewish artists in Britain. The third one was in New York. And the second one in 1985 was Jewish artists in Paris. And one of their editors was Kenneth Silver, who is at UPenn, or was recently at UPenn, and we've seen him a lot over at the museum. And then 14 years later, they got 5 stars about it. I loved this catalog. And it is an expressionist in Paris, the paintings of Chaim Soutine. It went to Los Angeles, and it went to Cincinnati. In this book, there's a whole section of photographs. This is Soutine with his dead chicken. He was really interested in painting dead animals. He was very influenced by Rembrandt. And I'm not going to talk a lot about that, unless you want to talk about it in the question and answer, because we only have the flayed rabbit in Philadelphia. So the contents of this, this catalog it was apparently based 3 different sections. Soutine before the Second World War, before the Second World War, after the Second World War, its reception in America, a really good illustrated biography. And then this one, Ellen Pratt, did a technical study of 12 paintings in the exhibition, because people had written a lot about what Soutine did and didn't say. And so she does it's a really wonderful chapter. She says, well, this is what so-and-so says, this is what so-and-so says, this is what so-and-so says. And then she tells us what actually did happen, and that is that he did reuse old canvases, but he also bought new ones. So there's evidence in these 12 that they examined. He would buy old canvases because they were cheap, right? He was poor. He used many brushes, he used different implements. There were fingerprints that they were able to find, because remember, I'm telling you that he did not allow people to watch him. And he did sew on more canvas, and he cut canvas. And the other thing that he did is that if there was a canvas that he didn't like the whole thing, but he liked something that he did, he then cut it. So this Girl in Green from Philadelphia was part of that 1999 exhibition. And when they took the frame off, they could see that the canvas had been folded all around. So that really led them to believe that he had done cuts, because this is small. So when I saw this, it reminded me that there's probably a very good chance that this little white hat painting the same thing would have happened. The Barnes paintings do not travel. Anything that was hung on the wall absolutely doesn't travel. So this would not have been part of conservation work in that exhibition. So in that same chapter, we find out about the catalog raisonné, and there are 600 to 1,000 works with questionable authenticity. Because one of the things that people were doing, they were taking some of his fragments, and even those 2 friends of his from Vilna were accused of doing some of that, because Soutine was very, very well known in Europe. Okay, so in London, and this exhibition did not travel. There was an exhibit at the Courtauld of portraits, cooks, waiters, and bellboys. And it's in that exhibition that we found the photograph of the 17-year-old pastry chef, Remy Zucchetto, I guess, who was the model for the pastry chef. And the story is that Soutine offered him the painting, or offered him some francs, and he took the money. So there we are. So this book, and it's nicely indexed. It's from the Courtauld, so you know it's going to be well researched. And in one of the footnotes, it says that the only published technical interview is that one from Ellen Pratt in '99. It's just a little footnote. So I was happy to find that, because I was wondering whether or not in the last 20 years there had been any published technical drawings. So for those of you who know me, one of the things that I absolutely believe that it's important for you to be not only a member of the Philadelphia Museum of Art, but the Barnes Foundation, because it's in Philadelphia. And so there's going to be a members talk next week by at noon on October the 30th by Karen Saris, who is the curator of paintings at the Courtauld and one of the editors of this book. So that just came up a couple of days ago, so that will be very interesting. And then there was an exhibition in 18 of flesh. There was not a catalog, and so what you're seeing here are going to be my photographs. This still life with the ray fish is magnificent. It's large. It's probably as big as our Kissling Soutine, but in the landscape mode. The painting is absolutely exquisite. This was worth coming to the exhibition to see this. It's owned by the Met, but I had never seen it at the Met, but maybe I was just in the wrong place. So here are just a few more of my photographs. There was a room of chickens, all dead, hanging, right? Gorgeous color, gorgeous color. And then 2 ducks. And also in this exhibition was this painting, Fish, Peppers, and Onions, because this was not on the wall in 1951 when Barnes died, so it could have been in the house, it could have been in conservation, but anyway, it was in storage, so it could be lent. So 2011, Paris Through the Window. This is the great Michael Taylor's exhibition that was over at the Perlman that was just packed. And this was the first time that I saw this painting. So I don't know that it's even been on view anymore, but this is our, because I had only known Soutines as portraits from the Barnes. So this was on view. But now this gets into something personal, because at that same exhibition, we saw The Pilgrim, this wonderful watercolor by Leon Basque, who was Chagall's teacher in St. Petersburg, the scenery designer and costume designer for Diaghilev's Ballet Russe. And it just led to, I'm just showing you a photograph of some of my books, right? So in Shocking Paris, the author refers back to the exhibition in Philadelphia and said, well received but not widely known. And his thought about why Soutine is not as well known in the United States is because the Barnes of Soutines cannot be lent, and the paintings are spread throughout the galleries. And you know, with some of them being up above the doorway, you have to look for them. So anyway, that was just a useful, it was a useful thought for me. So here are just a list of some of the exhibitions. This list I just took straight from the back of Shocking Paris, ending, you know, going up to the '85 exhibition at Montparnasse. And then there was this private gallery, the Pinothèque, which has since closed. And in 2012, they did an exhibition on Netter. And this is what the title of it was: The Netter Collection, Modigliani, Soutine, and the Montparnasse Adventure. So Jonas Netter is someone that I would really like to know more about. I live 50 miles from Alsace. I don't know that I ever saw anything about an exhibition in the Strasbourg or the Alsace area. So he's totally new to me. But there is a story of Soutine being in the south of France, and he spent all of his allowance on paint, and Netter comes and he just pays his bills. So he was a big supporter of the artists, and especially of Soutine. There was a big exhibition in Surrey and of the paintings, because lots of them are in private collections. Lots of them are in private collections, and there was a catalog, but so this is just something I took from their website. So Wanting to know more about the area, one could read about the Rotund, the Dome Cafes. Pasquin is the artist that Hemingway talks about in The Movable Feast. In many cases, a very rowdy bunch. But in the beginning of the Circle of Montparnasse, that 1985 exhibition, the opening sentences was not for Jules Pasquin. The first major presence of Jewish artists in Paris might have passed unnoticed. Soutine was Pasquin was quite a party guy and a collector of artists and had a pretty interesting life. There are 57 works by Pasquin at the Barnes, 19 oil paintings, but he is in the American paintings book. He is not in, he's not in the French collection. So I just, you know, his paintings are very, very interesting. The one on the right, The Girl in Blue, it almost looks like it's a watercolor, but it's not. It's a washed out oil. I mean, it's a thin oil. And so I'm just going to show you a couple more, just see the fluidity of the watercolor lines here. And a lot of those drawings are in those corner rooms. And so I just am showing you. So you have to go look for them. You know, they're not labeled. And they've taken the cards out. Just so that you can know that's where they are. So now I want to talk about the Emergency Rescue Committee because in Shocking Paris, there's a couple of chapters on then what happens to all of the artists. And here is a book that is published by the Holocaust Museum, but it was written in 1945 by a man named Varian Fry, who was sent to Paris by the Emergency Rescue Committee to bring out writers, poets, artists. He thought he was going to be there for a month. He actually went at the beginning of August and he had a return ticket for August the 29th. And he went with money and he went with the promise of emergency exit visas from Eleanor Roosevelt, who had worked for them through the State Department. And he went with this list of 200 artists that had been combined. It had been organized by a lot of people. And Alfred Barr of MoMA is the person who put together the list of artists. On that list was Chagall, Matisse, Lipschitz. And Matisse was on that list because of the Degenerate Art exhibition, and Matisse had been part of that. So they weren't necessarily thinking that, they were just going for a variety of people who they thought were in danger. So, as it turns out, Varian Fry stayed for 14 months until he was actually kicked out of the country. He was escorted out. He saved thousands of people. Lipschitz was actually number 795. But he couldn't have done this without the absolute work and support of a man named Hiram Bingham, who was the vice consul in the consulate in Marseille, who basically gave a transport visa, an American visa, to anyone that Fry got to him. Because in the 1940s, what was happening is you needed to have an affidavit in lieu of a passport, you needed to have a French exit visa, you needed to have Spanish and Portuguese transit visas in order to get out of the country, to get to Lisbon, to get on a boat, to get to America. You had to have some kind of an identity card. So I found this absolutely fascinating. And Soutine was in Paris when Fry was in Marseille. If Soutine had been on Fry's list, Fry would have had an address for him of some kind, or would have known some way to contact him, because the Emergency Rescue Committee gave him not only names, but also people to look for. So he simply wasn't on the list. And Meisler doesn't know why, but he wasn't. So the book that I'm currently reading is The Quiet American. It's another history book, but in that book on the list was Amadeo's brother Giuseppe, who was a socialist, and he was in danger. So he was one of the people that was on the list, and they got him out. So Barnes Foundation after 1951. 51 is when Albert Barnes was killed in an automobile accident, and the terms of his papers were that no art could transfer. No art could be moved. It had to stay in the galleries exactly as it was. And so there was really limited availability. But then after he died, a man named Wilhelm de Kooning got in because his wife knew Arthur B. Carl's wife. And so anyway, he got in. And so this is the final reason that I agreed to do this talk and thought about putting it together, because there's going to be an exhibition of Soutine and de Kooning at the Barnes Foundation in March of 2021. There's already been a press release from the Orangerie, because it's done in conjunction with the Orangerie. I don't know whether there's going to be a catalog, but there's a good chance that there will. I just don't know. Because what the Orangerie has been doing has been, during this time of the pandemic, they have been organizing, exhibitions about works that they own. So this is Our Seated Woman by de Kooning. This was done in 1940. And de Kooning talks about the influence of Soutine on his work. So this is one of his early women paintings. And there's, so the D is cut off. This is the cover of the book that I have, but I haven't started to read yet. And here's the Soutine self-portrait, which is owned by the Princeton Art Museum. And there are some other works by Soutine in Princeton, and maybe our works, I just don't know. When I do find out what the scope of it is, if I do find out, then I will send it to Guideposts, right? And so this is my last slide. And so if you want to see Soutine in Philadelphia, look at it again. My suggestion are rooms 19 and 14. Those are on the big rooms upstairs on either side when you get off the elevator or come up the steps. 267 to see our one Soutine, the Kissling Soutine, but it's out and it's big, and the room is big, so you have enough room to see it. And then you can look forward to the Soutine de Kooning exhibition coming in the spring. So that is it, and I think I am less than an hour.
Marvelous.
So.
Awesome, Alex.
Okay.
So if you wish to stop sharing your screen, and we'll kind of look what's in the chat.
Okay.
So we're still on record.
Okay. You want me to get out of the screen?
Yeah.
We'll stop the share.
Yes, let's go so we can see everybody who's joining us.
Okay.
So let me go. Let's take a look at what we've got going on in the chat. So Robin asks, do we know if Modigliani spoke Yiddish?
He spoke, where's D? He spoke the Italian version of Yiddish. What's Ladino or Ladino? That's what he spoke. Right.
Is D still with us? D?
She's with us, but her mute button's on.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's like
Hi,
Ladino. I think it's
Ladino.
Thank you, Jim.
That's Ladino, and it's the Mediterranean Jews, Spain, Italy. That was one of their languages,
Right.
But not the Yiddish of the Eastern
He did
Europe.
not speak Yiddish, right?
Right.
Okay.
From Megan, have any scholars studied Soutine's depiction of hands?
Not that I know of.
Okay. All right. Alicia writes in, so Soutine was poor, but the art dealer was selling his paintings to Barnes. Did he not receive any of that money other than that the allowance he received from the dealer?
So yes. So Zubrowski increased Soutine's allowance after the portraits, and so he had money, right? But he didn't just give it all to him, but he gave him enough, and then he started to sell much more of his work. So when he was in looking for a place to hide, he went to a couple of places where people took him in because they knew him as they knew his artwork, right?
Let me see. From Pam Fetters, would you give us again the details of the? I think it says
Conservation.
Is that supposed to be conservation presentation at Barnes?
Or curators.
Oh, the curator talk. Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, it's next Friday, the 30th. It's a members only tour. It's a members only presentation. So you have to be a member.
Mhm.
And
What
it's at
time?
12 o'clock. So if you're a member, you should have gotten that, the note coming up, but it's 12 o'clock by the curator. And so that should be very interesting. And at that point, then they might talk about what's going to come with the Soutine, de Kooning, but I don't know that for sure.
So then, of course, we have Robin, Alethea, a couple other people saying, excellent presentation, Alice. That was very comprehensive. And,
Yes.
you know, you covered a lot of the bases, I think, with a lot of the questions that, you know, we typically don't hear a lot about Soutine. I do remember that from the Chagall presentation. But, you know, it was, of course, you know, Chagall was the star of that show. And it was, you know, interesting, at least for me. I know I've seen the Soutines at the Barnes, but you're right, in not being able to see a lot of them together, to see how sometimes the colors changed or how his interest changed. You need to be able to see them collectively to kind of get a better appreciation, at least for me anyway.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the exhibitions that have been at the Jewish Museum, they're really excellent because it's small exhibition space, right? And so with the one that was flesh, you know, you could absorb it. You know, you could see it, you could look at it. It was pretty easy, right? So, but also, you know, like I said, I had to first go to the Barnes website and look at some of those paintings to even find out where they are. So that was job one, which I did right before in September, when I thought I was doing this the first time. Right.
Alice,
So,
in your researches, did you come across a very small exhibition at the High Museum? It would have been in the last 10 years or so.
no, what I was looking for was catalogs. I didn't come across it, but that doesn't mean that there's not a whole lot that's not out there. If somebody did a catalog, so how I found Shocking Paris was because I was looking for a photograph of Barnes, and all of a sudden this Shocking Paris book comes up because Michael Taylor had put in a recommendation for the book. And you know, those of you in the new class don't know Michael, but oh my gosh, he was a splendid curator, and he really loved the guides. He just gave us so much information, and yeah.
I have a question, Alice.
Yeah.
I have a question, Alice. So
yes,
you mentioned, and I remember this too, that, you know, Glackens was an artist in his own right.
Yes.
And, so do you think he was a major influence? I mean, like, how much art background did Barnes have before purchasing? And because of Glackens' artistic experience, was he one of the prime reasons for purchasing Soutine?
No. So Glackens was, so first of all, at Central High School, they did drawing classes. So that was one thing that, that was important. And so it was all those years of research between what Glackens chose, you see, and between what Glackens chose, that was really the big influence. The other thing is that Alfred Maurer, who was also a friend of Glackens and also of that same New York school, he spoke French. So Barnes spoke German, but he did not speak French. So Maurer would have also been an influence, and there are a number of Maurers over at the Barnes, but hard to find them, right? Right. The bigger influence was Leo Stein and John Dewey.
Right. Oh yeah, yes. I remember Yeah, because didn't, whatever, separate topic. Anyway, okay, so more questions from the crowd here. I think basically what we just have, Alice, is just a lot of people, or they say, oh, all right, so Doris says, many works look turbulent, especially the landscapes. Do we know why? And do we know how long he worked on his pieces?
Ah, yes. So we don't know why, but apparently he was a very, very intense painter. He would get into, frenzy's the wrong word, but he was very focused when he was painting. And like I said, he didn't let anybody look at his work. Apparently he also pulled on his paint sometime. That's why it was important that they saw that there were fingerprints.
Okay.
He did some paint portraits in a sitting, one sitting. That's for sure. That's documented by the people who he painted. I think others he spent a longer time on, but they don't know. Because sometimes he would go back and he would look at some of the work that he had done, and maybe he was going to improve it. And what he did then is that he destroyed it. And like I said, then he'd burn them. Right. Right.
So from a fellow Rodin guide, we have, is it known why he had such an interest in hands? And reminds me of Rodin, and that comes from Kara.
Yeah, hi, Kara. No, we don't know. I mean, you know what? It's not in everything that I have read. Right. So remember early on, I said, you know, he never talked about his art. Yeah. He never talked about his art. At the Barnes place, what they will say is that he, you know, he's sort of like with the pastry chef, he's getting, like an overall look that he wants to have to his paintings. And yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know that.
Okay, so
I don't think, right. So that's why that is why the chapter on conservation, when she lists like, this is what this person says, and this is what this person says, you know, there's just nothing for sure. Right. Right. And he didn't write a biography. He didn't write, he wrote a few letters to a friend. His last name was Fave. Yeah, right. You know, he did love Rembrandt. And so another part, which I decided not to do in terms of the flesh, he went and saw in the that 1999 Soutine book, he went and saw the Rembrandts. He saw the flayed ox. When he had some more money, then he bought the side of a cow, and he did this, and he poured blood on it, and yeah, and you know, he was smelly. He was in a public place. You know, he was in LaRouche, right, yeah.
Well, and also
so there's lots more to know about him.
Yeah, because LaRouche was very close to the slaughterhouses.
It was exactly right on the slaughterhouse ground, right. And you can still go there. You can still go and visit. Michael Taylor told us that he had been, and there is a website about the LaRouche, and it has the hours, and you know, like the hours before or after the pandemic, right?
Any other questions? Have I missed? I think I've got everybody. Yeah, go ahead, Ann.
Alice, I remember Violetta de Mazia talking about the first time Barnes purchased a painting that she claimed that he took a taxi from Paris to Arles and spent every cent that he received for the painting. Is that an apocryphal story? Did you run across that? Was that just
no.
a story of Violetta?
I didn't. I think so. You know, because there were other stories about him eating sardines. Do you remember that? That he ate the heads one day, and he ate the tails another week. Part of why I was trying to read was to see which of the stories were accurate. But I think that, you know, and I think there probably were all kinds of stories, but there's not many documented. And one of the things that this guy in Shocking Paris says is that there are a lot of things that were just very contradictory. So he said, you know, there was this one woman who was a later dealer who really, you know, was putting down the works that he had bought for Barnes. that Barnes had bought. And then, then the author is saying, but the other side of this is that there was also a very good chance that she was just trying to, talk about, how good her collection was, because her collection was because it was better or it was later. And there was a lot of criticism of Barnes, lots of criticism of Barnes, because he was buying so much, and, and people didn't know why he was doing it. And so I was just trying to get like the pure story, right. So, and there was something very specific about Barnes where he said, well, this is what Barnes said. Barnes said he never saw him anymore. Soutine said, he's sorry he got dressed up for the guy. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that happens later, but it's insignificant, right? Right. And then, so I'm just giving you, like some of the pure stories so that, they're as accurate as we can know. So that's why I think it will be interesting if there is a catalog for the Soutine de Kooning exhibition, right? Because if there is, then there will be more current research. So that's appealing, right? And I feel like there's a curator from the Tate who's doing that, who's being the curator for that, but I don't know. But we might find out more next Monday. I mean next Friday, on the 30th, right? And I want to go back to D. I think that there was, one of the, at the beginning of the '99 catalog, one of the authors talks about, his painting frenzy, but I think I think those were stories, right? So, okay. So I've loved doing all this reading. I have absolutely, I have loved it. I have loved it. And so when this is over, I'm doing it for 2 more other groups, and then I'm going to put all these books away and work on something else. So.
All right. Do we have any other questions then?
Yeah, I have one more question. Do we know if the Barnes will be lending any of its Soutines to the Orangery?
I'm sure they won't. They can't. But what they could lend would be if they're those 5 that I couldn't find that are possibly in storage. That would be what they could send.
When you say they can't, it's because of the rules of the trust?
Yes.
Is that why? Okay.
So nothing can be lent. That's why for sure it wasn't in the 1999 exhibition. So nothing can be lent. And actually they won't even take the Soutines off of the wall in the galleries and put them in this special exhibition space, right? They won't do that. So for tours, what they will most probably do is, like when they had Cezanne's apples a few years ago, right, they'll have a tour in the exhibition space, and then they will take you into the galleries to see them. It's not easy to do, right? So, and I don't even know what the focus is going to be. I expect it's going to be on portraits because that's what de Kooning was doing, but I don't know. That's why, I'm saying that as soon as I find out, I will. I'll send it to, I think it's Erica who's doing Guideposts, so I'll send it to Guideposts, right? We find out like a structure for what it's going to be, right? But it's going to be interesting, right? And after that, the Barnes is doing an exhibition on Suzanne Baladon. So there'll be 2 things to look forward to, right?
Any other questions?
I just want to say it makes me miss Michael Taylor, who was such a wonderful curator.
Yeah.
He's in Richmond.
Yes, you told me that. Yes, or somebody told me that. Right. Well, they're good luck. Wow. All
right.
Okay.
All right.
Good.
So I'm going to stop the recording at this point. We can hang on to keep the meeting going if anybody has anything social that they need to say. So I'm going to stop this and finish up by saying thank you, Alice. That was a really wonderful presentation. And I'm hoping that we get a lot of the rest of our guide group to join in and watch this recording, because awesome. Thank you so much. So well organized, and I think well received by our group today. So thank you, Alice.
You're very welcome,
And
Candace.
as soon
All right.
as
Thank you.
Candace weaves her magic and creates the link, I'll of course put it on the website, the home.
Great.
Thank you, Alice. Your passion is palpable.